Welcome back to Won't You Be My Gamer. We are joined once again by Justin Donovan, who is a professor at UCLA and an underwater archaeologist. Today we're going to be talking about the ethics of diving, especially in Dave the Diver, where Nicole's kind of playing it fast and loose.
It's a gray area.
Yeah. We're also talking about sea people and lost civilizations, lost cities. And then we're covering one more thing, Rex. So let's, I guess, jump right into the
We're going to dive in.
You can say dive in.
Okay, I mean, I didn't want to, it sounded, like you guys make that, so I didn't want to
We do that.
step on your territory.
Pirate's favorite letter?
R.
You would think, but it'd be the C.
I have to go. Today on the show, we're going to be talking a lot about history as related to underwater wrecks and artifacts, etc. So we want to know in the comments, if you were to leave something behind for future generations that's symbolic of you or your family or your culture, what that is.
I think I would leave behind a giant unopened container of Aquaphor. I think that would be indicative of who I am as a person, but also probably helpful for whoever finds that.
Gotcha. Justin, do you have anything?
Honestly, I was gonna say a can of Old Bay seasoning. I'm from Maryland, and Old Bay seasoning is an addiction.
Oh, okay. That's cool. What would you put that on?
Everything.
Everything.
It literally goes on everything.
Aquaphor, same thing.
Yeah.
Now we just have flavored Aquaphor.
I mean, maybe I'd leave a Nintendo Switch 2 because that would mean that I had a Nintendo Switch 2, which I don't currently. So fingers crossed. If you caught our last episode with Justin, we talked a lot about your experience getting into archaeology and the scuba diving component and what happens when you do a dive. But today we wanted to talk a bit more about like your specific research in the field that you focus on, which is you talk a lot about ancestral memory, correct? Because you're looking into a lot of transatlantic slave trade wrecks, correct?
Yeah. A lot of the work I do is, it can get pretty heavy. We're looking at a lot of the underwater history that exists, particularly related to slavery in the African diaspora. So we look for shipwrecks, particularly related to the slave trade. A lot of people know about slavery, know the history of slavery generally, but there were literally thousands of ships that crossed the Atlantic, and from those, hundreds of ships wrecked. And to date, we've found probably around 10 of them in the oceans across the world, so there's a lot to be explored.
So like only 10?
Only 10, yeah.
So what were the conditions on these ships kind of like?
Yeah, they're brutal. We have handwritten accounts that talk about the experiences, both from the experiences of the enslaved who later wrote about their accounts, and also from the people who were captains on these vessels. Oftentimes it was, minimum amounts of rations of food and water. Oftentimes the death rates were between 10 to 20, 25%. So they knew that people were going to die from starvation and other diseases on these vessels. And it took oftentimes several weeks for them to cross the Atlantic. And they had to deal with everything. If you can imagine getting seasick on a boat, but you're living under the deck for weeks at a time, it can get intense. There is a very famous case where the captain made a miscalculation and they were running out of water. And as a result of that, they literally started throwing people overboard to conserve water. It became a huge legal case because they tried to actually get financial compensation for the people they threw overboard, which is
I guess like humanity is not usually a priority.
Yeah, that wasn't high on their list back in the day, yeah.
We have our handy dandy PBS globe here.
Globes.
From the PBS studios. Could you show us like where some of the routes that you're talking about originated from?
For sure. So a lot of West and then West Central Africa were some of the bigger routes. And they were literally coming across the Atlantic. The ocean currents along northern West Africa would naturally bring you to the Caribbean, which is part of the reason why Columbus first landed in the Caribbean. And then as you get to Central Africa, I hope I'm pointing to the right one, that's when you start hitting Brazil. And so there's a huge population of folks coming from Central Africa to Brazil.
What you find in wrecks, does it tell you a lot about where these slaves were destined to go? Or like, is it more just telling you what life on the ships were like?
Yeah, generally speaking, it tells you what life on the ships were like. It's interesting, I tell people during this period, all ships were potentially slave ships. So they would just be refitted, and sometimes they would carry enslaved people when they made it to the Americas, and then they would be refitted and carry cargo back to Europe and then make the route again, that sort of triangular trade. But yeah, we don't find a whole lot of material on a lot of these vessels because over time, it's been over 200 years in some cases, so they tend to deteriorate.
Nicole, I noticed that you have your escape pod already.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about some like important, serious things.
Yeah.
But like, I did just rescue a dolphin.
Oh, okay. Time out.
A dolphin came up to me and was like, "Can you help me?"
Let's
and
see
I
the
was like,
replay.
"You bet."
Did you speak with the dolphin?
I did.
A friend of mine runs this program called Project SETI in Dominica, and they're actually exploring whale language right now. So they're using AI to see if they can study whale language.
So are they trying to like talk to the whales?
Yeah, they're trying to
Like, mimic
understand
their
them first,
speech?
and then eventually they can talk to them. Yeah,
I saw something that said that blue whales are especially quiet right now.
Oh, interesting.
And then like people are like, "Well, that can't be good."
Yeah.
No.
Some of these whales, once they go to the bottom of the ocean, they can literally communicate across the Atlantic. So it's it's a big thing.
Do you know what their findings have been so far? Like, have they mapped a lot of language?
Yeah, I don't know what's been published and what's not been published, so I'm not going to get too
Okay,
much into
okay.
details, but I will say he pretty firmly said in the next 10 years we will be able to understand another species, just based on how AI communication is going and the
Wow.
research that's happening.
I mean, I remember when that whale talked in Avatar 2,
Yeah.
and that was definitely a highlight for me.
That changed the game.
So now you're in a sushi restaurant?
Yeah. So the kind of the game loop is I dive during the day, and then at night I am wait staff for a sushi restaurant that I do not seem to be invested in. Like I don't think that I am getting paid.
But there's fun little
properly.
mini games like this where you just try
But
to
there
fill
are
a
fun
cup.
little mini games.
Okay, this is not like Zero Dreams, the sushi type of restaurant. This is like
No.
just trying to pay the bills.
No.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, this tracks, honestly, divers don't make a lot of money. We do get to dive every day usually, which is a nice perk of the job. But if you're gonna get rich, we tend not to tell you to get into the dive industry. Yeah.
Have you ever dived at an aquarium?
I have not. That's on my bucket list.
Really? Because
Yeah.
I've been to aquariums, I've seen people. It just seems so cool.
It is. I heard the wait list for the Georgia Aquarium is like months at a time. But yeah, if you can get there, I heard it's a cool job.
The Society of Black Archaeologists that you work with,
Mm-hmm.
is that like a community where you go on dives together or you're sharing information, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a mix of different things. We're generally just like a sort of social organization of archaeologists from all over the world. We've got a Francophone group, folks who are from the French Caribbean and from French West Africa. There's a Lusophone group, folks that are from Brazil. And then we've got colleagues that have similar organizations in Europe and Brazil and so forth. So we kind of all just communicate around what we're doing and the kind of work we're interested in. And then sometimes we'll plan projects together or we'll break off and do different events. Just had a big conference in Senegal earlier this year.
Can you talk a little bit about the importance of Black visibility in archaeology?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I tell people archaeology is essentially like us exploring the past, and everybody's history and past is going to be different. And for us at the Society of Black Archaeologists, we just realize that there's so much potential in us exploring topics of our history that generally have not been written down, and that archaeology is a prime sort of tool to explore. So we've kind of come together under that general umbrella, and then from there it sort of branches off into studying topics of slavery in the Americas, studying differentiation between slavery in Brazil versus the Caribbean, and then studying African history in terms of things that aren't slave trade related, but are generally about African history more widely, and how do we get resources to study these things? How do we explore the questions that we want to explore and the topics that we want to explore?
What are like some of those kind of like questions or topics?
There's a lot. One of the big questions is sort of these gaps in history, I'll say. For example, in African archaeology, there's a whole lot of questions around how is it that ancient Egypt related to parts of West Africa and Southern Africa that we often don't relate to? We often think Egyptians just stayed in Egypt and there was no influence or cross exchange. So having some of those conversations has been interesting to see what those cultural influences would have been. Underwater archaeology is a big conversation right now. Generally, it's so expensive that it's been relegated to mostly Europe and America. But now we're having questions around, can we do underwater archaeology off the coast of West Africa?
Have there been any like major discoveries made?
Yeah, not major discoveries, but there's a lot of underwater work happening in Senegal right now at the University of Cheikh Anta Diop. They're training divers out there.
This is an area of archaeology that has been neglected,
Yeah, definitely.
underfunded, I'm sure.
100%. Yeah, funding is always a big issue, and then capacity building and making sure that the training and the resources and the lab materials are there. Yeah.
Is there like justice that you can go now and retroactively find in doing some of this work?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that myself and my colleague Ayana Fluellen at Stanford are exploring is this idea of sort of restorative archaeology, where some of the work I'm doing in St. Croix now is looking at coral mining with my colleagues, and they would actually mine coral out of the ocean and then use the coral to build the buildings. And we're actually exploring like what species of coral were being mined and how can that inform then how we do coral restoration work off the coast. So there's a lot of things that we can begin to explore around maybe not, arguing financial restitution, but just ways that we can begin to rebuild the environment.
Nicole, you're just kind of diving. You have a harpoon. You're just
Yeah.
harpooning whatever.
A little knife, a harpoon. Yeah, I'm kind of indiscriminate.
Yeah.
There are some fish that are too big for me to attack, but otherwise I'm kind of just attacking.
Yeah. Is this right?
It's better than where we've been in the past. I will
Okay.
say, like, if you watch the early Jacques Cousteau videos, and
Oh, yeah.
they literally would do like fish counts to see like what fish were in the ocean.
That was like, bro,
It was like literally drop a bomb in the ocean and see what floats up, and then we count
Yeah.
what floats. So this is
jeez.
better than that. But generally speaking, like endangered species and marine life.
She's
is-
brandishing that knife.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am just straight up trying to like corner them against a wall.
They know that it's violent. I will say, yeah, there's certain regulations around it. There's certain seasons around fishing, certain types of marine life, and certain sizes and ages of marine life restrictions, and all those things that come into play.
We had a great guest on the show, Ian Lee, who's a chef here in LA, and she talked a little bit about like sustainable sushi and like, getting fish that are within season and that are not overfished and stuff. When it comes to like going down into these ecosystems, are you doing it in a certain way where you're trying not to like disturb them, or you're doing it ethically, and what does that mean?
Yeah, 100%. I think the biggest thing we learned in diving is we say don't touch anything. The only thing you leave is bubbles. Because a lot of these marine environments are so sensitive that if you disturb them, kick up soil sediment with your fins or anything like that, it can really destroy a habitat. Especially touching coral and breaking coral. It's relatively fragile, even though it's durable. So we try to maintain our buoyancy underwater pretty well. We don't try to bump into anything, touch anything that's living. With that said, some of these wrecks have turned into habitats for some of these animals. So in some cases, we won't excavate. We'll take photographs and measure things just to try not to disturb.
Can you tell us about one or two of the wreck sites that you've gone down to, and where those are and what they are?
I would say probably the most impactful wrecks I've looked at. One of them was the Clotilda, which was the last slave ship to come into the United States. It's off the coast of Mobile, Alabama. It's pretty active. It's literally in a river, so it's actively flowing, and it's pretty dangerous because logs and all kinds of things are actively floating in there. But yeah, there are pieces and remains of that ship that are still in the sediment there. They've recently built a museum around it after its more recent discovery. It was after the slave trade was abolished, so technically it was an illegal voyage. But it was actually a bet between a logger in Alabama and his friend, and said, I can go to Africa and come back with
Oh my
slave folks.
God.
And,
Oh,
yeah.
A bet?
Yeah, it was a bet, like in the movies, yeah.
oh my gosh.
Wild situation. But yeah, that was one of them that I worked on. And that was interesting because we worked mostly topside. So we were on the barge, sediment was getting pumped out, and we're sifting through sediment on the top of the vessel.
What sort of things were you finding there?
That one we didn't find too much. Most of it was pieces of the vessel, so a lot of pieces of wood and fastenings and metal fastenings. That was a little different though because it was intentionally sunken. So they took everything they could off of it, and then they intentionally sunk it so that they wouldn't be discovered.
Oh my
That's
gosh,
just the idea.
horrible.
Yeah.
Like a lot of these wrecks, they are effectively grave sites.
Right. Yeah, in many cases.
Is there kind of like a reverence or respect that goes into then going down to them?
Yeah, definitely. Different people have different practices, some personal, some collective, that they do. We try to pour libations before we go on a wreck, so literally pouring out alcohol over top of a wreck and honoring those whose lives were taken at these sites. But in some cases, it's acknowledging by placing a reef on the water, or in the case of the Henrietta Marie, which is off the coast of Florida, there's an actual plaque at the bottom of the ocean at the wreck.
It's very cool.
Let's see.
What were the conditions of the Henrietta Marie?
The Henrietta Marie sunk off the coast of Florida. It was actually found by the Mill Fisher Museum. So if you go into the Florida Keys at the Mill Fisher Museum, they have pieces of that wreck that are there. That one is a difficult sort of story to piece together, in part because it's about a 2-hour boat ride out, and then the conditions have known to be choppy, so there's not a lot of active work that can be done. But they found literally hundreds of shackles on that
Oh my
wreck.
God.
So
When you're looking at these wrecks, are there human remains down there?
no, we often don't find human
Okay,
remains.
so are there ways to kind of determine like how many people would have been on the ship and would have gone down with it?
Yeah, there's generally like the size of the ship gives us some insight into that. A lot of these vessels were very well documented because they were insured. So oftentimes they would record how many people came on the vessel, how many people died on the vessel, and how many people left. If there was an insurrection, they would record there was an insurrection because they would essentially ask for financial retribution for that. So
So for anyone who like maybe had family that remained in, say, Africa or somewhere that's trying to trace like what happened to a family member or lineage or whatever, are there ways to do that through these wrecks?
That gets a lot trickier, only because like names weren't recorded oftentimes, and so we don't do like family to family connections as much as we do generally understand those sort of tribal affiliations or ethnic affiliations because people were generally coming from similar areas.
I've heard you mention that you practice your work with a lot of inspiration from indigenous people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I got into archaeology fairly recently. It's been about 20 years now, and a lot of the questions and conversations we're having in Black history and African history are questions that indigenous archaeologists have been grappling with even before some of the work that we've been doing. So we often look to them around, how it is that they're handling certain sites of reverence. There's a lot of conversations now about not doing archaeology anymore because so much stuff has been dug up or looted, and thinking of interesting and creative ways that are necessary to sort of honor and acknowledge the past without actually taking it out of the ground or disturbing it. So. And we look to case studies in those instances and sometimes collaborative projects together.
It's very cool. Speaking of disturbing, though, Nicole is just like trying to harpoon
you're
these
right.
jellyfish, maybe?
Yeah, no, it's exactly what I was trying and failing to do. I'm gonna move on because my harpoon's not strong enough.
I think they won.
Right.
But yeah, just kind of exploring.
Aside from the harpooning, is this kind of accurate to your experience?
No, but it looks nice.
What's wrong with it?
Well, one, this is very, very clear water. So, yeah, looking into the distant past over there with these underwater formations in these mountains we don't see that. The other thing is, this is 40 meters. Yeah, we usually don't go down this deep. If we do go down this deep, there's a whole series of tiered processes we have to do before we come up. You have to do what we call a safety stop. If you come up too quickly, it can lead to some serious health issues. So we actually have to stop at like 15 feet for about 3 minutes, just to kind of cool off.
3 minutes, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so and that you don't want that to happen. That's
So
Yeah.
that's the first time I've died in this game.
oh no!
You know,
And
But you were just doing it as a demonstration, right?
I wanted
Nicole?
you guys to know what it was like.
What's he saying, Nicole?
He's saying, "Come follow me." Yeah.
what
and
happened to the dolphin?
We're just gonna follow this guy.
Oh yeah. Do you remember? Was it Echo the Dolphin?
Oh, yeah,
Sega
Echo the
Genesis?
Dolphin. That's what we should have been playing.
Yeah, a wave race and just have the dolphin chase us.
I don't know
Yeah.
at what point Dolphin Week turned into Shark Week, but I think we should focus on the dolphins more.
I agree.
so,
What do they know? Because
Pirates
this
must have
wasn't a-
captured it illegally. Do you ever run into like quote unquote like bad guys?
Yeah, I mean, I realize a lot of it is people just don't know the rules and regulations, even though they should. So, like, literally, we were diving off the coast of Catalina 3 days ago, and there were people fishing at a marine sanctuary.
No. Oh.
Oh, I can't.
Okay.
A lot of the waters that you go into, are they international waters?
Yeah, I do a lot of dives internationally. It's not necessarily international waters because we're usually pretty close to the coastline.
Oh, okay.
International waters are pretty for.
I was gonna say, no, all the rules are off, baby.
Yeah, it gets interesting. There's a whole like UN convention around how you treat heritage in international waters. But
Really?
The U.S. hasn't signed that convention.
Okay. So what are the ways that you treat heritage in those waters then?
That's when lawyers get involved.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was a big case around a Spanish galleon that was found off the coast of Colombia probably about 30 years ago. And it had, at the time of what was estimated to be several $100 million worth of emeralds and other valuables on it. It turned into a big legal battle because the Spanish argued it was a Spanish galleon, so
Yes.
therefore Spain gets it. Colombia said it's in Colombia waters, so
yeah.
we get it. And then it was a U.S. firm that found it. It ended up being like a 30-year legal battle, and the Colombian government eventually ruled in its favor. You can do it!
Maybe higher up on that rope?
So I will say this looks somewhat accurate. You use less air when you're closer to the surface.
Really?
Yeah, and then probably has to do with the pressure
Oh, okay.
and all those things. So yeah, you did good going on.
You're reunited.
And on my first try, third. Have you ever met an underwater creature that you felt you had a bond with?
Bond, interesting. I haven't had
The
my
kids wanna
octopus
know.
teacher experience.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, there are some cool critters that live in some of these sites. I was working on a World War II plane wreck underwater in Hawaii, and there was an octopus that was like living in the cockpit of the plane.
Do you eat seafood?
I do.
Okay.
I do eat seafood.
My husband watched a YouTube series about Leon the lobster and built such a parasocial relationship that he won't eat lobster now. Question related to movie magic.
Okay.
When you go on a scuba dive and you see that oxygen bubble, that air pocket, can you take your
Regulator out and
regulator
breathe in?
off in there, or is that all fart gas?
That's a good question.
Science.
You could take your regulator off. I wouldn't recommend it.
Okay.
You're not going to get a whole lot of air to breathe in from it. But yeah, they could also be it could also be fire gas. Yeah, underwater does have a smell to it.
Going back to some of your work,
Yeah.
have there been any like previously lost Black heritage that your like archaeological studies have unearthed and brought to light?
You know, people know about wrecks going down, but they don't actually know where they're located. So a lot of it is like bringing this knowledge back to sites, and then people realizing just how close they are to some of these sites. It can be impactful to communities. One of the big projects we're working on now is actually looking for the Black Star Line ships, which was a shipping company owned by Marcus Garvey in the 1920s and his organization. It was, at the time in the 20s, the largest Black organization in the world, and it was a fully Black-owned shipping company. 2 of the wrecks went down. There were 3 wrecks altogether. The one that we're looking for right now actually went down because the boiler blew on the wreck. Yeah, and so it went down in a harbor.
So what happened to his company ultimately?
It eventually went under. It was a huge legal case. He got charged with mail fraud.
Guys, I found a Sea People artifact.
Wait, I think that's the one.
So Dr. Bacon,
Okay.
he's an underwater archaeologist as well, I believe.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. And he has given me this quest to search this land, this ocean, for evidence of a lost sea people.
Oh,
Civilization?
wow.
A lost civilization.
I like the food theme to come in there too, Dr. Bacon.
And something's happening. Like I'm a shaken.
Wait, what?
Yeah, and you turn up the vibration on the controller too, so you really...
That's an eyeball? So that's never happened to you or yet?
No, can't say I've seen giant eyeballs
Okay.
underwater.
And lost
but
civilizations?
that's a squid.
Probably not true, but there are lost cities, right?
Definitely lost cities. That happens. Yeah, I mentioned Port Royal, I think, in the other program, but Port Royal, Jamaica is a city that literally went underwater from an earthquake. You hear the term sea people used sometimes for coastal people who like literally live on top of the water, and they dive so much and so frequently that they're called quote unquote sea people. But there has been scientific evidence that say like if you dive frequently enough, the cornea in your eyes can start to change, and other like adaptive situations start to change with your body. So there's a lot of interesting water physics that we still don't fully know. We do know that if you run out of air, you do die. So unfortunately, that's
that's something I've tested quite a few times, and I'm in the process of testing right now as I race to the surface.
Sorry, you're going quick. You are going quick.
Don't think it's quick enough.
Do the rising ocean waters and like sinking coastlines have any bearing on underwater archaeology?
Definitely. I mean, we do have sites that were once on land that are now underwater. I often tell my students the Channel Islands at one point used to be a large landmass, and now it's a series of islands because it's been flooded. But there are indigenous sites that are underwater now that used to be land sites at one point.
That's a big deal that you're on the track of these sea people, Nicole.
Yeah. I do wonder if he means people who lived on the coast and, lived and worked with the water, or if he literally means people that could breathe underwater.
I think it might be the latter.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
How do we feel about Cobra? Do we think maybe there's something good behind him there, like with a name like Cobra and kind of the evil stuff he's been saying?
Right.
You know, I will say,
Yeah.
like, these vessels are expensive to run, and oftentimes people are just trying to recoup the money that they invest in these things. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's trying to find some stuff he can sell on eBay.
Have you ever had to deal with any corrupt divers who are like, we could put this on eBay, and you're like, no.
I haven't dealt with corrupt divers doing that, but sometimes you have to talk to folks who like, oh yeah, I pulled this out of the water a few years ago. And you're like, no, that's illegal.
Thanks so much for coming by again, Justin, playing the Dave the Diver with us. How can people learn more about your work or take your classes?
Yeah, thank you. So I teach at UCLA, so you can stop by campus if y'all are around. You can follow my work. I do some work with National Geographic, so you can look at some of my National Geographic work. And then my personal website, justindonovan.com, has some of the latest research stuff on there too.
Very, very cool.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for following us at the new channel, subscribing, and continuing to support us. Nicole, how can they keep doing it?
They can go to pbssocal.org/gamer and make a donation. Any amount helps. We are so appreciative. And then, make sure to subscribe and tell your friends.
We don't have to hold our breath again, do we?
No,
Okay.
I'm too good at it.
Oh, you almost got him.
I didn't get it.
Almost.
Get another one. Yeah, got him. Nicole, you're a vegetarian. You're
Yeah, this has been morally a conflicting episode.
I'm sorry.